this is going to take you five years before you start to see the outcomes that you think you're going to achieve. And I remember walking away from him thinking, 5 years, mate? What are you talking about? You don't know what you're on about. It's not going to take me 5 years. Jamie Oliver was right.
In this episode of We Built This Business, Nathan Atkinson shares how Rethink Food, a non-profit, is transforming food education and tackling hunger in schools. He has a mission to reach 7,000, but it's not easy. Now let's head over to the podcast. So Nathan, could you start by just telling us what Rethink Food is all about today? How many employees you have and whereabouts are you based?
Rethink Food is registered as a community interest company, so essentially a not-for-profit organisation. And our mission is to deliver 10 million hours of food education, and that's to help children and young people live healthier lives. In terms of our operation, we have 12 full-time team members, and we also have about between 20 and 30 regular volunteers who help on different aspects of the business.
Okay, so the food education part, could you just tell us a little bit more about that side?
Yeah, so when we first started, we were very focused on crisis support, so very much in terms of the problem that we were trying to solve was that children were coming to school hungry, and we were providing food for children, food for families, and it was that essentially pulling people out of the river when they're in this crisis. But as the organisation has evolved, we've wanted to focus more and more on stopping people falling in the river. So that early intervention, so focusing on educational programs around health, essentially. And we have a learning platform by which schools are able to log on, access different filmed content that's all to do with educating young people about health choices, food choices, activity choices that will give them the skills to be better informed around their own personal health, and hopefully in the long term be able to live healthier lives. And that's around understanding food, access of food, but also the right kind of food, nutrition, and then access to food. And we're doing it in a really thoughtful and imaginative way, because children and young people have become very resistant to traditional food messaging over time, like 5 a day, sugar swaps, all those kind of things. There's become a great resistance to those. So my passion is in creative school curriculum programs, and that's what we're looking to do. It's that reimagining food education and reimagining health education for the young people of today. So that's kind of where the educational side of things fit.
Sounds really interesting. And I wanted to just find out, why do you think there's been resistance to I grew up with the 5 a day, for example, so I understand it. I know it. It's simple to follow. Why do you think the current generation, there is a resistance to it?
I think just from overexposure, I guess, and things essentially become like a wallpaper. If you've got a Post-it note on your fridge that you're looking at every single day, you eventually become blind to it, I guess. And young people are so engaged in different things from when that original messaging came along, and everybody's fighting for young people's attention. So when it's something that is as essentially dry as that old health messaging, we've got to look for new ways. And one of the ways that we leaned into that was to use the environment. So we developed a program of eating to save the planet. And when you take that responsibility away from that personal development, so 5 a day is all about you and what you're doing for you. But when we found that you're doing it for the planet, then we saw young people really responding to that. And actually, you can trace that back through the neurological development of the brain, that when you reach a certain age, doing something for a greater cause. And people remember, maybe I'm a little bit older than you, but it was like about saving the whales years ago. People suddenly, by a certain age, things like that switch on, and that's proven that it's in the neurological development of the brain that when you reach a certain age, that kind of thing kicks in. So we were talking to young people and guiding them around eating to save the planet. And guess what? When you eat to save the planet, you're actually eating to improve your own health and well-being as well. So it's kind of that stealth health approach that we're getting young people to take these steps, thinking about reducing food waste. Because if food waste was a country, it would be the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases behind America and China, which is absolutely colossal. And 70% of food waste occurs within the home. And that equates to about £700 a year per family. So it's getting people bought into messaging like that, which can then help them make healthier choices for themselves, essentially. We think about the use of plastics. We think about eating seasonally. All these different things that mean that if you follow that, the plate of food that you eat and the basket of food that you buy, or the trolley of food, or the delivery, or however it comes to you, will ultimately be better for your own health and well-being as well.
That's it's a very good analogy there. And like you say, attention is essentially marketing, and every company and every business out there is fighting for that attention. Let's go back to the beginning, Nathan. So before Rethink Food, what were you up to, and how did you go from there to setting up Rethink Food as a not-for-profit?
My background is in primary school education, so started off as a primary school teacher, eventually worked my way through to become a head teacher. And the real pivotal moment for this journey was in October 2014. So in the September of that year, I'd taken over the school leadership. So I'd become a head teacher of a big inner city school in Leeds. We had 680 pupils on roll. It served the bottom 2% of deprivation nationally. It had 48 languages were spoken in the school, and it also had a specialist provision for children with autism. So in terms of a challenge, it was definitely that. It was the most challenging of places, but it was also the most amazing space and place with young people, the energy, all kinds of amazing things. But equally, it was the most challenging place I've ever been. It was my third headship, and I always wanted to work in areas of deprivation so we could make a difference to the community. So I'd been there for half a term. We had the October half-term holiday, had a week off, absolutely crashed and burned, came back on the Monday with full of energy, ready to go again. And it was one of those days when everything that could go wrong did go wrong, including the gas failing in our school kitchen. So as resourceful as primary school teachers are, we thought that's fine, not a problem. We'll just give the children sandwiches for their dinner. So we gave the children sandwiches, and during that lunchtime, the behaviour in school was worse than it normally was. So there was all kinds of things kicking off. Now, one of my beliefs is that all behaviour is a form of communication. So rather than yelling at these kids and telling them how horrible they were because they'd done X, Y, and Z, I sat down with some of the children and said, I can't imagine what it must feel like to be so angry that you've done this, this, and this. And one of the older boys stood up and he said, I'll show you, which kind of confused me a little bit. And he pointed to his stomach. He said, it hurts here. So I've had a week off at home and all I've eaten is bread and crisps. Normally on the first day back, you give us a roast dinner. And today you've given me more bread and more crisps. And I'm hungry. And that absolutely floored me. Now, bearing in mind that this is 2014, so since that point, a lot has changed in terms of provision for young people, access to the HAF program, which is funded by the government, which provides support during the holidays. So it's the Holiday Activity Fund. So that's a huge development, and a huge sort of progress has been made. But at that time, it was really shocking. I went back to my office wall and I wrote the word hunger on my office wall, and we talked about this in the senior leadership team meeting, and we thought about it strategically, that if we essentially, as a school, you're responsible for public money, but the efficiency of that public money is reduced when you've got kids coming to school hungry. You're spending a lot of money on teacher training, good resources, great curriculum, but if children are arriving hungry, they can't concentrate, they can't focus, then you're not getting the best out of them. So I made this pledge to remove hunger as a barrier to learning. I bought a toaster for every classroom. I remember going to a supermarket and buying like 24 toasters, and the woman joking saying, "Are you going to lots of weddings?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to feed every kid in my school every day." So put this toaster in every classroom and offered a universal breakfast. In 2012, I'd had an amazing opportunity to visit some schools in China, and we visited a whole host of different ones, including the most amazing school that you would never, it's hard to describe to you, but one of their classrooms was a coffee classroom. And I was like, went into this space and it was like what you would imagine having afternoon tea at the Savoy to be like in a school setting. And I'm like, what is this space? And they said, well, we want to be able to educate our children around coffee etiquette. And that kind of like blew my mind. I was like, well, if that space exists in a school, I want to create something for the opposite end of the social spectrum. So I want to create something for a community that doesn't have this amazing opportunity to learn around coffee etiquette. So I built a cafe in my school, and we made it look like a Costa Coffee, or a Starbucks. And we used it as a teaching space. So we used it to teach life skills, but we also used it to teach maths and writing and a whole host of stuff. But then I also was able to use it to bring families into school. So it's always good to be able to engage with families, but traditionally in schools, you bring them back into school. And if you ever go to like a parents' evening, you generally sat on a small table and small chairs, and you're reinforcing any negative experiences that people had in school. So I wanted to create this space that was welcoming, that respected people, and we could put at the center of our community. So we had this cafe, and after a while of playing around with this, realized that we couldn't spend the school budget on food for families, so needed to get creative around that. And it was brought to my attention that supermarkets were throwing a lot of food away. So I was linked in with a local Morrison's and a wholesaler that was just round the corner from school, and they let me take their essentially food waste, surplus food.
How did you get in touch with them? I mean, I can imagine did you just walk in there and speak to the general manager, or did you contact them, the head office?
No, it was very local level to start off with, and again, this whole industry around surplus food has changed massively. Back in 2014, it was very unregulated and ad hoc. Subsequently, you've got organisations like Fair Share and Neighbourly who have structured and systemized and in many ways made this a lot safer. But back then it was go into store, talk to the manager, yes, you can take it. So I ended up with that much food that I bought a market stall, which I put at the school gates. And previously I would stand at the school gates and say good morning to the families and pretty much just get ignored or shouted at. But when I put food there, people stopped and they talked, and they shared stories, they shared vulnerabilities, and we were able to build this relationship with families. And we put the food inside as well, so families could come in. And previously I'd advertised like an English lesson for parents and nobody would come. But when you put food there and said, come and have some toast and some cake and a drink, then people came in, and we used that as a way of removing the barrier. So that was all going on in my school. I opened my school 52 weeks a year. Again, that's something that's more common these days.
When you say you've opened it 52 weeks a year, I mean, my son's in primary school, well, both my sons are in primary school, and they're not open, in the summer holidays, in Easter, in Christmas. How are you still running the school, or what's happening in the weeks when curriculum doesn't normally happen?
So we had, we created a couple of posts in school that were 52 weeks. So we had members of staff that were employed on a 52-week contract, which meant that they would run activities and interventions for targeted families. Because one thing that we found was that when families returned after the holidays, we had a huge spike in domestic violence incidents and young people in families in crisis. And so by opening the school for 52 weeks, those incidents reduced. because we had that regular contact, because the school is such an important part of a community to be able to offer that ongoing support. And the drive was that we were doing it to provide food, and in more and more schools now have touch points with families throughout the whole school year rather than closing down all year. It's not universal, but it is more common than it was back then.
Okay. So the kids are able to come in, that they're able to get a hot meal, they're able to learn, they're able to do some activities, whereas before, obviously, they would be at home and potentially not, getting those facilities and those options, essentially.
Yeah. So kept doing that, and I was driving to school one day and just thought, I can't keep this to myself. Surely there must be other schools that are finding similar obstacles. So I decided, with the help of some local organisations and other volunteers, to do an awareness day across Leeds, where we hosted an event which shone a spotlight on this, and we linked in with lots of other schools. I created an assembly for schools so that they could share the issues around hunger, around food, and the legacy of that essentially became Rethink Food. So just fast forward a little bit, I met with another teacher in another school who took part in that day, Kevin Mackay, and he came to meet me one day after school. Sat together, we'd never met each other. We just chatted about the vision, what was possible, the challenge, how this could be a real opportunity. And such was his belief and confidence that he quit his job the next day when he went back into his own school and said, I'm going to help you pursue this. And the reason why he gave his notice in the next day was because in school you have to give half a term notice, and that was like the deadline, almost transfer deadline day. So he handed his notice in, he came out of school, and a year later I followed him, and then we set up Rethink Food as the community interest company in January 2018.
So great story. And you've now got two of you. So how do you go from that to setting up and becoming a not-for-profit and being able to help? Do you get government funding? So how do you, I'm trying to think of it from a business, like sales point of view, almost how do you get money to help people?
Yeah, it's quite a journey. Well, we started with about £100 in the bank, and that was a donation from a family who didn't want to buy Christmas cards or presents for people, and they gave us this £100, and that was the first piece of money that we put into our account. Now, it's quite a journey, and I'll try and plot it out. So when we first started, the very first program that we offered to schools was a program by which we worked with them to set up their own little business, their own little community enterprise within their school. So we worked with them to create their own business name, logo, and slogan. And that was essentially to run the market stalls like I had in my school. And then we paid a third-party provider to deliver surplus food into schools. So we charged the schools, they signed up, they paid an annual service level agreement with us, and for £2,600 they paid us. We provided the education, and that was very much in person, so Kevin and myself going into schools delivering that, and then we paid this surplus food organisation to go into schools to send the food into schools essentially. So they ran the market stall. So that was our first operation, and that ran across Leeds and Bradford. So we had approximately 30 schools paying $2,600. We were using some of that. Well, actually, at that time, I was also doing other jobs in educational consultancy. So I wasn't taking any money from the organisation. I was doing other things. So I was doing educational coaching, head teacher consultation, assessment for different professional qualifications. So I was kind of bridging that gap, whereas we could afford for Kev to be full-time. So it was a hybrid working model for me. And then So that was working successfully. In 2017, I made it to the final of a global teaching competition. So there was an award called the Global Teacher Prize.
Were you nominated for that, or did you have to apply?
Yeah, I was nominated, and then part of the process was I then had to follow that nomination up with a formal application. So I think there are about 45,000 people that were then, I made it to the top 50. And
Wow.
as part of that, it was an incredible experience. So it's the Varkey Foundation that runs that, and the prize was for the winning teacher, one teacher, and it's still continuing to this day. One teacher wins £1 million to invest in a project of their choice. So I didn't win the £1 million, but the top 50 people were invited to an event in Dubai, and it was a global educational event that took place at the Atlantis Hotel in Dubai, and that was the most surreal and incredible experience. And I met a teacher from New York, and he had these growing towers in his classroom, and it was like soil-free growing. And I was like, these are incredible. We've got a program that's dealing with food waste, but how wouldn't it be amazing if we could get these growing towers into classrooms as well?
So when you say growing towers, what, are they growing food?
Yeah, so you can pretty much grow anything in them, but he was using it to grow food. So it's had essentially it's a salad bar that grows in your classroom. They're about 5 feet tall. They use an aeroponic system that essentially accelerates the growth of produce. So you go from a seed to salad in 60 days. This is all kind of marketing stuff that we've developed along the process. And I asked him where he got them from, and he's like, "Oh, the company only based in America, so you can't get the products anywhere other than that. But I'll introduce you to the manufacturers," which he did, and I managed to speak to the people that produce these growing towers. And the guy was in Europe, and he was in London for about 6 hours. And he said, "I'll meet you in London." So this is where that £100 that we spoke about before was relevant. So Kevin and myself was like, right, we'll meet this guy in London. We'll take him out for some food, and we will try and get him to see if he can give us some of these growing towers because they're incredible. And so we met him bizarrely at the Winston Churchill statue in Parliament Square. Took him to a reasonable-ish restaurant that somebody had taken me to, stretching ourselves a little bit, and just chatted to this guy about what we wanted to do. And at the end of the meeting, he was like, right, I'll ship you 3 of these units from America as soon as I get back. And we don't want to sell them in Europe yet, but you guys see how you go, see if there's any interest, and we'll kind of informally support you to do this. And the best part was that he paid for dinner as well. So we still had our £100 in our bank. So it was
a nice guy.
Yeah. it was a good moment. And so we introduced these growing towers into schools, and this does relate into finance as well, because originally it was a brand new product to the UK. So nobody had seen these before. I was so excited, so enthusiastic, and thought, everybody, wow, people will want these, they'll be great. And it was like, trying to break a new product is just so ridiculously hard. And in my naivety, I just thought everybody would want to do these and everybody would want these. No, I remember one week I sent 2,000 emails to schools, and I got one reply. But actually that one reply was brilliant, because I was able to really work with that one school. I managed to get some national lottery funding then to work with that school. I was able to get the growing towers into that one school, and got local TV coverage of these growing towers.
When you said you sent 2,000 emails, was that manually or through a CRM system?
No, it was me going onto school websites, finding the email address, copying and pasting it and sending an email. So literally setting those 2,000 emails myself. Having first spectacularly written the address down in a book as well. So, yeah, it was quite raw, I guess.
love the persistence though. That is fantastic. And then you got one reply and it worked.
Yeah, that one reply, and still working with that one school as well now, which is great. But the thing was that I realised quickly that they were quite expensive, and when you added in the fact that we needed to offer facilitation, we had to add quite a margin onto that. So basically I had a program that was about £2,000 that schools couldn't afford. So I was like, right, I'm going to go to speak to corporates and show the social value that this can add and see if some corporates will fund it. So I managed to get an introduction to a woman who worked at Savills, the property company. So I went down to London and met her in their one of their big offices just off Oxford Street. They have an amazing little restaurant downstairs, cafe restaurant downstairs. So I met her in there. She didn't know why she was meeting me, I don't think, but I managed to tell her this story, what I wanted to do, and she's like, "Oh, it sounds really interesting, and our socio-economic group of Savills would be really interested in this. Can I come to Leeds and see it in action?" So she came up on the train. We took her to some of the schools that we're working in, show her the towers, show her some of the challenges, and she agreed to, I think it was, they funded 4, I think, to start off with, which was incredible. And then subsequently, and we're still working with Savills as one of our corporate partners now. And the journey with Savills has been incredible, because when we first met, we said we wanted to we didn't just want a financial transaction. We wanted to build relationships with organizations and work with people over time. So the story with Savills is that as well as providing funding for over 35 schools now, I have delivered educational lunch and learn sessions at their various offices across the UK. Kevin became the first non-Savills employee to be invited onto their leadership program, so that helped us develop us organisationally as well. We worked with them on a project at the Chelsea Flower Show last year, where we helped relocate the garden that they'd sponsored into a children's home. I'm about to start an apprenticeship, which the apprenticeship levy from Savills is paying for. So it's become an amazing partnership that's kind of opened up lots of different opportunities. But most importantly, it's put this amazing resource into schools. So we had the Growing Tower, we had the surplus food program, and I was traveling all over. So at the start, you asked me where we were, and I don't think I answered that. So we're in Leeds, and I would be in Bristol one day, Edinburgh, Glasgow, London, Sheffield, Belfast, all over, doing this physical implementation of the sessions, and it was exhausting. And then COVID hit.
So this was early 2020 when you were at this point. Yeah.
There was still just myself and Kev working on everything, and so COVID hit, and we went, well, that's that then. We've got probably money in the bank to last us till May, and that's when the organisation that was providing the surplus food to schools that we were paying, we joined forces more closely with them during lockdown, and we said, we're not going to be allowed into schools, but schools still need food. So we worked really closely together, and we helped build this supply of food. So we were working in partnership across Leeds to help the organisations in Leeds, and we did it on a zero hero approach, whereas we weren't telling everybody what we were doing. We just focused on doing the right thing for the communities and the people that we were working with in Leeds, and the surplus food side grew and grew and grew because of the work that we were doing collaboratively. And Rethink Food had worked really hard to build a strong brand and a recognized name. And so over time, during that time, the surplus food organization started trading as Rethink Food as well. So they adopted our name. And we've now reached, and I'll jump around a little bit, but after COVID, we acquired that business. So we acquired it into our operation. So the original organization ceased to exist, and we tupied the team over, and we now have that surplus food operation within our organization. So we can maybe unpick that, but I'll just go back to the challenges that we're facing in lockdown. One of them being, how do you deliver the educational content? So we went on a journey of creating a learning platform, and myself and Kev, we'd previously worked with a freelance videographer on a number of different pieces. We had a friend who has a multi office working space, and it looked pretty funky, natural brickwork, great furniture. So we went in there and filmed all our content, and we've just basically put it unlisted on YouTube and started sharing the links. Then we formalized that by creating a learning platform, and then we were serving the schools, and one of our mentors said, come on guys, you're getting too old and you're rubbish at presenting. You need to think about doing better. And over time that's evolved. But I guess the pivotal moment in terms of the learning platform, so we were serving these probably about 60 schools, 70 schools with content, and we were speaking with the Greggs Foundation. So the Greggs Foundation, as in the bakery, sausage rolls, vegan sausage rolls. So the Greggs Foundation provide funding for 1,000 schools every single day to have a breakfast club.
I did not know that. That's incredible, isn't it?
So yeah, they're an amazing organisation. So doing a lot of support for communities, but the breakfast club is one of the biggest things. And we'd been commissioned by Greggs to do a small piece of work for them. But when they found out about the learning platform, they said, well, we've currently got a contract with a national supplier delivering a health program across the UK. Could you use your learning platform to reach more schools than we're currently reaching with a health program? So they left us with this question. We came up with a pitch and a concept. It always sounds much simpler than it was, but it was pretty simple. We went on a train journey from Leeds to London and came up with this idea on the way. And we joked about writing the finances down on the back of a cigarette packet, and we got scared by the amount of money that this was totaling, and thought there's no way we can possibly ask any organisation for this amount of money. So we can just do it for this amount. The reality was we should have asked for more, but we didn't, and we've had to work incredibly hard with very generous funding to create this health program, which is now, we've gone through a whole journey where we now have a in-house production team. We work with professional presenters, and we have an amazing health program which is called Agents of Change, which was funded in terms of the content, so the script writers, the process, the now it's on the platform, the account management going into, it's in 645 schools at the moment.
So is this program primarily going to teachers? Is it going to students, or is it going to parents, or is it going to all three?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's in schools now, and it's program that the teachers log on and they press play, and the films take them through the different phases and stages of the program. So it's to help teachers teach a difficult subject. So it's a health program. It focuses on sustainability, food, and health, and so it's helping teachers, but it's engaging young people.
And is it aimed at secondary school or is it primary school?
It's primary. It's primary school, so it's Key Stage 2 at the moment. But the funding that we received from Greggs has been extended for another year, and we will be able to create an early years program and a Key Stage 1 program with this additional funding. So it will go from 3-year-olds right the way through to 11-year-olds.
And that's now currently at 645 schools, you were saying?
Yes, yeah.
What an incredible achievement.
Well, it's been relentless. We have our ambition is to be in 7,000 schools, which is when there are about 22,000 primary schools across the UK, and we've set ourselves a target of getting to 7,000. I'm
just thinking, it may sound very simple, but can you contact the schools minister?
It becomes quite difficult because
I'm just thinking of the percentages. If you're looking to work with 7,000 schools, that's a third.
Yeah,
you're going to need government assistance at some point for them to, because they should roll this out. If it's working in a third of schools, it should be rolled out.
Well, the difficulty is because we are essentially a business. The government can't say one particular program has to be delivered because there are other food programs, there are other health programs. I guess it's essentially it's a competitive market, so you can't give one person a monopoly on the delivery of something into the schools. So there are schools that might choose to work. There's nothing that's identical to our program at the moment, but working with schools, because at the moment, our program, this Agents of Change program, is entirely funded. So we work with corporates as well as the Greggs Foundation, to fund this for the first year for a school. So a school signs up to the program, they get it funded for a year, and then the year after is when they subscribe and pay out of their own school budget. So it's that's the model that we're operating at the moment.
This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. Looking at the future of Rethink Food, marketing, I imagine, is one of the hardest challenges, getting your name out there, like you said, going back to the attention side of things. How do you get in front of schools now? Do you still send 2,000 emails manually, or?
No, we do have Salesforce now, which has been something I've not got involved with, to be honest. So the way that we split the business in terms of day-to-day, Kevin manages the business and the finance side, the organizational infrastructure, things like Salesforce, whereas I am in the creative side, working on sort of being out there, that essentially the marketing side. And it's relentless. And even though our program is funded and so essentially free at the point of access to schools, you'd think, wow, that's fine, every school is going to say yes to it. But schools are such busy places. It's become a bit of a dark art in working with schools. And our team, there are a number of former head teachers and teachers now that are working as part of the Rethink Food team. So we're using all our experience in schools to be able to talk to schools, to be able to know how to get to the right person, how to get past the gatekeeper in a school. Because anybody who knows, if you ring a school, to get past that person that answers the phone is quite hard going. So lots of different strategies, lots of different approaches. We were able to recruit a new member of the team in January who's focusing on the marketing and the sales to schools, sales as in getting the program in there. So it is truly relentless, and when we first started, I spent a lot of time doing speaking events and going to head teacher conferences, speaking at various industry events. And then we kind of reached a point where it was like, right, we have created this momentum. We now have to just get our heads down and deliver. And so we didn't get out as much. But then when Sinead joined the team in December, that myself getting back out there has now sort of happened again. And I'm speaking at different events, getting coverage in magazines, radio, also TV as well. So that again is creating more interest, and we now have a much more solid, concrete offer. Whereas when we first started, it was just, this is about feeding hungry kids, this is about crisis support, but now it's matured in that it's that early intervention, behavioural change, which frustratingly, if you're asking for support for crisis support, people are very quick to sign a check and say, yes, we'll support that. But when the narrative is around, this is a longer term investment, people are more cautious and less reluctant to give that support. That being said, people, when they get to understand the process and the story, are still very supportive. And going back to a much earlier question that you asked around the finances, currently we are about 75% corporate and grant funded, with 25% self-generated income. Our goal over the next 3 to 5 years is to flip that to be that 75% self-generated income and the 25% corporate funded. So there is a challenge in there because we operate as a business, but we're still reliant upon grant funding from different organisations.
And self-generated is essentially the school's education program and all that side of things.
We one thing that we've not touched upon is the food side of things. So we have the surplus food operation, which runs throughout the week, and we rescue about 10 tons of food a week from a variety of places. So that might be supermarket, back of store, wholesalers, or different food organisations, donations. So 10 tons of food comes in here. The first round of it goes to the schools programme, so the market stalls. But to get the right type of food, so when we first started this, we were like, just give food out. It doesn't matter what kind of food, just get the food out. But now we have a nutritionalist as a member of our team, so we're thinking about the nutritional value of the food, and to get the amount of food to give to the schools, the right kind of food, the healthy food, the nutritious food, you have to just basically collect 3 times the amount that you need, because you have to quality assure that. So then what happens is the schools get the first amount of food, then we have about 20 community groups from across Leeds and Bradford who are running their own organisation, providing meals and pantries and food banks. So they come and collect food from us, and that works on a paid service as well. So they come and pay us for the food. And then we have 180 families who are part of a subscription service where they pay £12.75 a week for a crate of food. So it's a complete mixed crate. We can't plan, we can't predict, but there's a variety of food in. And we price check that at they get about £40 worth of food for £12.75. And so that means that we have very little waste that we actually create, and any waste that we do generate is goes to anaerobic digestion and some non-domestic farmers as well. So that's kind of the food side. So we generate an income through that side of the organisation as well.
It's brilliant. Yeah, there's so much room for expansion as well, as in, like, you know, everyone in every area of the country could benefit from what you're providing. Did you say that is provided in Leeds and Bradford? It's not nationwide at the moment. It's where you're currently located.
Yeah. So just before lockdown happened, we were working with Asda, and Asda funded 50 schools to have the surplus food program, but it was 50 schools across the UK, and the model was that we were training their community champions who were based in stores to go into schools and deliver this program. And FareShare at the time had committed, so FareShare are a national organisation that deal with food waste on an unimaginable scale, and FareShare is a franchised operation right away across the UK. So they had capacity before lockdown to deliver into these 50 schools, because we have no desire to grow our surplus food operation outside Leeds. We're happy with what it is. It ticks along. It's part of our original story, and it's really important to us to serve the communities that we do. So FareShare, in principle, agreed to deliver to the schools across the UK. But when the pandemic hit, the amount of food support that was needed in higher areas of deprivation, higher areas of need, the school programme wasn't able to take off the way that we'd anticipated. So if we could work with a national provider who could guarantee a weekly delivery of food into these school communities, then that would be a go. But actually, food and surplus food in that way has become a very competitive market, and we've created a dependency on surplus food to help people in need, in crisis, and it's a very bad model. Because like I gave you the statistic around food waste at the beginning of the conversation, we've got this dependency now on food waste. But what's very interesting is there's a huge drive to reduce food waste from a commercial and an environmental element. And the CEOs of the big supermarkets are starting to have food waste tied into their bonuses. So it's within the interest of these organisations not to generate the food waste, but we're seeing there's a huge demand for the food waste for organisations like ours. So at the moment, we're exploring a model of buying food. So we're working with a national wholesaler to be able to, they've done us a very generous deal in terms of the price that they're selling us food, because we've seen food waste reduced locally. Two providers that we worked with, Ocado Zoom and Amazon Food, in the last 12 months have restructured and changed their model essentially to reduce waste. And that means that our supply of food can fluctuate greatly. So we're always about risk assessment and anticipating risks to the organisation. So we're currently exploring this model of buying food at a reduced rate to be able to supply to some of the groups.
Those are I guess are the challenges that you've got, like you said, with the environmental side of things, that companies are trying to reduce the waste, and the food waste that is providing the surplus food that you need to provide to these families and to these schools. So it's a real challenging environment. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the future of Rethink. So we've got that you're looking to go to 7,000 schools, that you want your model to be 75% self-generated. What does the next 2 years, for example, look like for Rethink?
We are so determined to improve health outcomes. And for us, one of the biggest areas of vulnerability in education is with teachers. So teachers are leaving the profession at a crazy rate. The government have committed to increasing teachers in school, but our concern is for the overall health and well-being of a school community. 99% guarantee that if you walk into a staff room, it's not a bowl of fruit on the table, it's a box of chocolates or biscuits or sweets. So not in a sort of a big brother way, but we want to support teachers become more mindful of their own health and well-being, to support schools become healthier places. And some of our corporate partners have asked if there is any way a version of our program can be available to their staff as well. So it's almost looking at kind of HR in its most purest sense is about the well-being and investment in your workforce. it's become very much a negative thing about holding people to account. But actually, is there an opportunity for Rethink Food to create an amazing HR program that invests in employees and team members so that it's thinking about the health and well-being and using our experience working with young people? Because we find that things that we create for young people, we've delivered in workshops for corporates, we've delivered to adult groups, and they're very transferable. So it's exploring whether there's an opportunity, first of all, to work with the workforce within schools as well as the young people, but then are there opportunities kind of outside there? So very much focused on this health and well-being. And personally, I've been on the journey with that. When I came out of school, I was very unhealthy. I was exhausted. I had unhealthy behaviours to help me survive in school. I was 2 stone heavier than I am now, drinking an unhealthy level, antidepressants. It wasn't a good picture for me leaving education, but having been able to reset, to learn, to invest in my own health and well-being, I feel that there's an opportunity to combine the experience that we have working in schools with the experience that we have around health and well-being to help other people as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's some great opportunities there, and I imagine from your side as well, it's almost never-ending, the amount of help that you could provide. You know, just looking at the company's level, I can imagine walking into some corporate HQs and seeing these growing towers. You know, there's those sorts of opportunities that I can see snowballing, and then into the education within the well-being in the workplace and all that sort of side of things.
Yeah, one great achievement that we had with the towers was that the United Nations run an event called COP, which is a Conference of the Parties, which was in Glasgow. COP26 was in Glasgow, and I managed to get 17 of the growing towers to be actually in Glasgow at one of the main spaces. So the Glasgow Science Centre was a host venue for that, and we managed to get the growing towers into COP26. We managed to get them. We have had them in corporate businesses as kind of partnership things. So yeah, there are opportunities to reach out into those different spaces as well.
I've got 3 questions for you, Nathan, just to finish. Wanted to find out the toasters. Do you still buy toasters for the classes? Did it work? How did it go? I've got visions of everyone going in and putting their bread in and butter and jam and everything.
Well, interestingly, the new government has pledged that every school will have to offer a universal free breakfast to every pupil. So a madcap idea back in 2014 is the government announced just this week, they put out an expression of interest, and the first step with this is going to be 750 schools in April will start a pilot of a universal breakfast club for all children, and I'd be very interested to see how that's implemented. There are some great organisations that do breakfast club at a large scale. Magic Breakfast, the Greg's Breakfast Clubs, Kellogg's do a breakfast club, but that model now is going to change because it will be centrally funded for schools. So there's some huge challenges in there, but in terms of us providing the toasters, we definitely don't do it. But it was an experiment and a way. It improved attendance. It helped with well-being of pupils because they could talk about their emotions when they arrived at school and unpick different things using food as that medium.
That's brilliant. Yeah, really, really entrepreneurial, innovative as well. And like you said, to see the results in plain sight as well. And it's great to hear that the government are now looking to roll something like that out on a national level. Second question is, what advice would you give someone trying to start a not-for-profit business in 2024? So you're now 10 years in. What advice would you give now, knowing that you've been working in one for 10 years?
Be resilient, keep fighting for that social justice, and try to manage your expectations. So at the risk of being a div and name dropping, I did a film with Jamie Oliver, and he said to me, "This is going to take you five years before you start to see the outcomes that you think you're going to achieve." And I remember walking away from him thinking, 5 years, mate. What are you even on about? What are you talking about? You don't know what you're on about. It's not going to take me 5 years. Jamie Oliver was right. It's going to take time. And I think that the risk is in not-for-profit is that you don't operate as a business. Sometimes we've seen that people can neglect the financial implications, the responsibilities. You are running a business and you have the responsibilities that go with that. So we've learned so much about being a business because we're open to learning, because we want to do things correctly. I can remember when we first got our very first VAT bill, just being devastated, thinking, man, what do we have to do this for? We're doing good stuff. We're tackling this social injustice, and here's a 4,000 bill from VAT, and just little things like that can detract from what you're trying to achieve. And so, yeah, just take that responsibility, but go for it, because there are so many social injustices and there are so many good organizations working to do good things. And I guess that it can provide opportunities for people, it, as well as the social injustice that we're trying to address. We are now an employer. So we've got these 12 people who are fully employed with pension and everything that kind of goes with that. So there's huge responsibility, but also huge pride in the achievements that you can achieve.
It's a great answer. Final question is, what other podcasts or books have you read recently that you would recommend or inspire others?
Podcast-wise, I went through the whole Stephen Bartlett process and realised that wasn't for me. I just listened to a few of Chris Williamson's podcasts recently, Modern Wisdom. Some interesting people on there. I'm not somebody that will just take what people say as gospel. I'm curious and kind of use those things as sort of questioning and challenging in myself. There's some great people on there. I think book-wise, I'm always reading. I try to read non-fiction on the morning and fiction on an evening as part of my routine, so to try and balance things up. I just read Goggins' book, which is insane. David Goggins, what a guy, what a relentless machine. But again, can take things with a pinch of salt. And Tim Grover is a great guy. I don't know if you've ever heard him on a podcast. He was Michael Jordan's and then Kobe Bryant's personal trainer. He's got 2 books. One's called Winning, one called Relentless. And again, you have to take the things with a pinch of salt. But I find that there are learning opportunities for me in everything. I'm a super curious person by nature. I lean into that curiosity to develop myself, to develop the organization. So, but I'm kind of going on a bit. I kind of reach a point with podcasts where you can't take any more in. And so I switch from podcasts to music, and then I'll go back to the podcasts after a while, because there is just so much information that's there for you to absorb and take in that it can just become lost. So trying to balance that information with enjoyment and downtime as well, because that's when the ideas can actually start to come out of the ground.
Yeah, curiosity is almost a superpower as well. If you're constantly learning, you're constantly bringing new ideas into your brain, aren't you? But yeah, like you say, you need some almost downtime to be able to process it and actually come up with how you can put that into your own organisation. Nathan, it's been a fantastic conversation, really inspirational. How can people that have listened to the podcast find out more about you and also Rethink Food?
So we're at Rethink Food UK across all socials, rethinkfood.co.uk on our website. There are opportunities for school engagement, but also corporate partnerships and engagement. And just taking the time to get to know us, understand what we do in a little bit more detail, have those conversations. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. So if anybody wants to connect, that would be fantastic.
Lovely. Well, thanks again, Nathan. And if you enjoyed this podcast, if you could do one thing for me, if you could like, follow, or subscribe to the channel on your podcasting app, enables us to grow the show. Thank you.